Good evening. You're listening to the Xtreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob, broadcasting to you from 1966. This is a stream that I'm putting out in the future in my time machine from the Pineless Palace, just west of Orlando, Florida. I have the young 20-something Professor Pixel joining me. Tonight we're talking about Forever Night as we round up Season 1, our individual episodic reviews. Check them out on the Xtreme Movie Show. Thanks for the super fans out there and the other people that are retweeting and letting us know we exist. This show, Pixel, has been pretty interesting as far as the idea of a progressive cop not wanting to kill, drink blood, do something different to just sort of fit in. I think it's a nice little allegory for some of the things they bring up because here in Forever Night with Nick Knight, 800 years old, the guy's a bit of a pansy. We knew at some point we're going to get really cool stuff from the flashback B story that would be representative of the moral issue in the current episode and the current time. And we were treated as such great things such as Joan of Arc and his master, the one who turned him, LaCroix, kind of allegedly dying off even though we see him. The guy's done really well with his presence and what little screen time he's had. But here, we had something that I thought might be interesting because at some point you're going to see those damn bastard German Nazi types. Nick's looking for a book, and it's supposed to have something to do with vampires or whatever. Not to be confused with an Necronomicon or something out of the Ninth Gate with Johnny Depp, let's say. But this is an episode that, I don't know, there's a hostage situation at the beginning. We'll talk about that, but the B backstory leads into this other thing. I kind of like parts of both, but I don't think together they meshed well, necessarily.
Yeah. I'm going to go say that, no, they don't mesh at all.
Really?
No, not at all. What you get is possibly the laziest modern story that we've had yet. It's this hostage situation. This guy wants his brother. I want my brother. And he gets to a point where he's like, if I don't want my brother, then we're all going to die. And he pulls out a grenade. It's that's it. I think the entire sequence of the modern setting Stone Tree also gets shot. My bad. But he's okay.
Yeah, I mean,
it's so lackluster. It's like they're all bored to be there. You have Natalie, who is used as the primary hostage. Oh, are you going in there? Oh, good. And she stands around for 10 minutes. That's the episode. It's obviously not her fault that she was used as a hostage, but
right.
The only thing that they have is the line saying, we're all hostages. That is what connects the two stories.
Well, the thing I felt misled, not in a bad way, but just I thought it was going in a certain place. We see the guy with the gun early on in the episode, literally when it starts. And you see Natalie being startled by this guy who's in a trench coat, and we know he's the one with the gun. And she has absolutely zero hint of danger with the guy. And I know that she's didn't she do, what was it, the video dating thing that she was a part of or something? They did something with her personal life. We talked about her and Nick and their supposed interest. She's certainly not ugly. She's a working professional. You know, she's not necessarily supposed to be a sex pot, but I thought, oh, maybe they might flesh out a little bit of her in here. And so I'm like, okay. And there's some episodes where Shanky and Nick have great buddy cop chemistry, and other ones where Shanky's like the guy spouting off everything to us as a viewer to pay attention to while we're watching Nick angst. I don't know if that's an actual verbiage word, but I'm going to say it. But the backstory about being hostages had something to it because, one, it's in the past. We know there's a hint of what we don't know here. And I go, that is like a mystery. When you cross that with something that's the opposite, a crisis, to me, you really shift gears a lot. And yeah, you're right. They're hostages together, right? Nick does the thing at the beginning where he's like, hey, no, take me, leave her out of it. You don't need it. We get him flashing back because he's looking for this book. And so I thought what was interesting is because he finds himself as a potential hostage because he's trying to find something related to his past, allegedly. I like that. I don't know that we got a lot of it. We got a lot of the logistical, hey, I've just been turned into a vampire. How do I survive? And we've seen a few compelling things about it, but they're not what they don't always do. I've noticed in season 1 here is, okay, Nick turned 800 years ago. when you turn, you have to learn how to be a vampire. You learn how to survive. You learn how to live through generations. We might think of a generation as 30, 35 years, but back then it might have been 15 to 20 because of the life and death span. We see him in different predicaments over the years, and the timeline is not symmetrical. We don't necessarily see him being, in my opinion, more mature in every episode from the first flashback being, say, 800 years ago when he got turned, and the next one 700, and then 605. It's not linear. So it does skip around, and that's convenient for storytelling purposes. But in terms of the character thing, I don't know, because like I say, angsty Nick is really what it's all about, and he does such a great job of being that way. And then here, he's going to help some people out who work for the resistance back in the war to get information book. And honestly, you should have known this episode was special because the shirt he wears, when you look in the B story, the turtleneck's not quite a full neck, it's like a half neck or a quarter neck. And Nick, if you're going to commit, you have to always go for full turtleneck. You can't go, it's 100%, it's binary, it's all or nothing. And as the fashionista here on the Xtreme Movie Show, I have to let people wear, besides he has a really bad haircut too, they just kind of pushed it forward too. But it gave me almost Indiana Jones-ish vibes with, we're looking for something secret, something that was written in history. Here's a beautiful woman back in history that may be a part of it, that doesn't trust him. She's automatically more interesting in two minutes on screen than anything going on with the hostage situation, because it's not like we know who the guy who wants his brother, and it's just like some jabroni. Am I wrong?
Nope, not at all. And that's what sits in my mind when I think about this episode. It bothers me kind of, because it's like it's lazy. It really is. The hostage story is just lazy.
I didn't know if we dealt with a hardcore drug addict. Say we had a really good episode about addiction and how to deal with it. I loved how they integrated that into the storyline. Here with the hostage thing, we don't know, hey, is this guy like coked out? Is he, on this and that, some psychotic drug that the government that this guy got a hands on, or any what would become conspiracy theory type stuff in the 90s, more mainstream, that wasn't in a lot of modern day television and movies necessarily. That would be kind of cool. I don't think there has to be a hard and fast rule of, hey, if the two stories have to have the same thing in common, okay, great. How do you integrate them? I'm not saying you have to have 20 minutes in a modern story, 20 minutes in the B storyline, and then a few minutes in between kind of tying them up. I don't think that at all. But here, they spent a lot more time in the past story, and it's a lot more interesting. It could have been a standalone episode, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. You don't if these were two separate, both okay-ish stories, I could have forgiven it. Everything is more interesting in 1966. Everything else is just a snooze fest. And even then, 1966, because you meet the brother and the father, and that are another stunning woman that we go ahead and get for an episode.
Yeah.
The best part about the modern setting is at the end, after the hostage situation is dealt with, he goes home and he looks over a letter, and she thanks Nick for getting him out. And she knows that he's still looking for a cure, and she's made it her life goal as well. But she has children, and they're grown and everything. So that's a nice moment. That's a really nice, touching moment. She sees it, and she doesn't act like a child about, oh, you're a vampire. I like that. But everything else in this episode, it's really not good to me.
Well, the backstory is interesting because, you don't have to have Nazis in them. You don't have to say this is in Hitler, even though it's in Germany, right? You do see like a flag in the background for those that bothers. But again, this show was 30 plus years ago. So it doesn't bother me at all. It reminds you of the air of what they're under, and younger listeners trying to find something new and following, and that it was significant. So of course, as people were falling, that they'd be killed, be put in a gas chamber, whatnot. So I like the fact that you have a threat that kind of bonds these two parties together. Nick's looking for something he doesn't want to tell me. He doesn't want to tell me he's a vampire in his book, calls the secrets for maybe why or how to deal with it. But he kind of, it's the whole thing. Hey, if you help me find this book, I'll help you survive to the East. And what's interesting too, when we think about with Nick being older, is that America being a relatively young country compared to Europe at the time, when he's talking about America and everything else there too, you go, oh yeah, the America he's going to be in. And we know he's got probably another lifetime ahead of him or behind him that he has some experience. Maybe he came to America in the 1500s and 1600s, and then he's gone back, and then who knows where he's been. So it's about time they show some of this to us. And it's compelling because, like I said, I just found this engaging because it's like, well, they haven't set up a lot of stuff for his vampire background other than how he got turned. And he does have to reveal himself as their little adventure under the like in the catacombs comes along, and so she understands it. And what I liked about a lot of the women they have in the series is they have a string of beautiful women, but they're not just dingbats. They're not just sex pots. They're not there just to be hot. They're just not a titty show or something like that. I like have a bad movie. This woman's smart, and what I thought was interesting, and whether this is intentional or not, you see stuff like this in movies. Nick, the more as this goes on, his jacket comes off, his shirt gets whatever, her hair is piled up. Now it comes down. They're becoming more relaxed in each other while the father's talking or whatever, and it ends with basically him, at least the B story part to it, of they don't get the book, but she's like, hey, I'm never going to stop looking for this for you, kind of thing, and I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. And so it's a very slow burn. But the guy who's, the hostage situation, and he's sitting there, it's like, I'm not believing the guy. He didn't have any gravitas behind it that led any credibility to the season. Even when he's got the grenade in his hand and he like pulls the pin out and he's holding on to it. I mean, the guy's not a bad actor. I'm not saying it's like that, but it's like, I just didn't feel threatened. What do you want me to feel in this episode? Threatened? Hostage? Or hostages were on a secret mission? No, it's just not the same. It could have been hostages of like an emotional situation or something that's more mental as opposed to situational, if that makes sense. I don't want to sound like I'm rambling here, but totally different storylines emotionally here to me.
Yeah, no, I really am just kind of frustrated with this one, unfortunately. I would have rather, like you said, if this could have just been set in Berlin. Maybe he's thinking about it. Maybe it's his day off and he receives the letter and he opens it up, and then we get the backstory. And then you get that final thing. We know it's never enough. And he says it is. And that would have been fine. But instead, we got what we got. Yeah.
When she sees him, she's like, oh, this is why you want the book, or like this. Like, yeah. And he does the emotional thing. It's my curse. And he has the really bad makeup on over. I don't mind this at all. I think it's kind of good. And when they say goodbye, he doesn't have to kill her. Again, he's progressive. He's trying to be mature. That's the whole setup for the show or whatever. I think that's neat. But the only thing, too, that might lead some credence into we're getting into the last 2 episodes of the season 1 here is that we see LaCroix there. He's wearing a deliciously red ascot above a white shirt. So even though he walks around with those frosted tips, which drives me crazy, he burns the book, right? And so you just don't know if that's going to happen. And then, Skanky comes in and saves the day, by shooting a bad guy. And I'm like, there's elements of certain things here, but a slow motion catch of a grenade, that just really didn't do it for me. The backstory was good. I liked it. Unfortunately, the backstory is better than the front story. Then that's a problem. I don't know if that's going to continue or not. I'm not disappointed. I just noticing the difference. And you know what? They could have stuck with the long, drawn-out episode of one or the other. In this case, the B story would have been a lot better. But Stone Tree hasn't had a lot of character development necessarily. This doesn't do much for him, even though he gets shot. So maybe they'll do something with him coming up at some point or whatever. I do hear that season 2 and 3 are a bit different, and we'll see as we eventually review those what's going to happen. But right now, it's a decent group of characters. They all kind of have their role. It's just there. I don't feel it building momentum going the last couple episodes of the season, and I don't know if we're supposed to. So I don't want to hold that against it either. But this is one of those stories where you're like, no to the main story, yes to the backstory. It's very rare that we're getting both. Final thoughts?
Yeah, no. If we're probably not going to rank all of them because we've probably forgotten like a quarter of them. But this is one of those that we'd rather forget, or at least I would. Listen,
Yeah,
I don't mean to be bitter towards it, but it really grinds my gears that it's just so disappointing.
and it's not that it can't be good or isn't good enough, because you don't have to have it be strong. It's just when you have two things, sometimes the ratios of them matter, and if one is outstanding more than the other, you screw up. You know, it's like cooking. Certain combinations always go well. You know, like spice and chocolate or sweet and sour, and you may be predisposed to liking one more than the other, but you've got to nail those. You can't just say, well, twice as more is going to make this dish twice as good. It doesn't work that way. And there's a delicacy to it. And I want to give the show credit for the fact that, again, it's progressive in that sense that he's trying to be what we haven't seen yet with vampires. I'm serious about it. And look, it's a late night TV show, filling in a late night time slot. You're not going to have a lot of people watching. It's a cult show. It was on for 3 seasons, and it did change. So that's cool. And not everyone's going to be a home run. It looks low budget. And it is low budget, and I don't mind because I'm getting used to seeing all this stuff. I'm just jonesing for some more Raven and Jeanette kind of stuff, and everything else there that's a little Vampire the Masquerade-ish or whatever, because I just feel like this is kind of a precursor to all that stuff. This is different than other stuff that was coming out in the 90s too, with like I always talk about, the 150-pound mopey vampires that like don't instill any fear in you whatsoever. Even LaCroix here does a solid job too. So we'll see what happens in the next episode. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching and listening here for Forever Night Season 1. We'll continue that next week with our next review as we run down that. And if there's any other shows, ladies and gentlemen, that you'd like us to be interested in considering reviewing the season 1 of, let us know in the comments below. And of course, thank you to some of the super fans and other people that have been retweeting, letting people know we exist. This show, Forever Night, is definitely a cult show. Pixel, I think you'd agree with me that if you give it a chance, give it several episodes, if it's the kind of thing you like and you enjoy it and you get it, that is definitely worth the watch. I've definitely found that for myself.
Yep, I agree.
Good night now.
This was not a Dan Curtis production.